Hello everyone and welcome to our panel discussion on public EV charging, where we'll be probing the question, how fast is fast enough? I'm Nino De Cara, founder of Electric Autonomy Canada, and I'm delighted to introduce today's discussion, which is sponsored by LeadingAhead Energy. LeadingAhead Energy are electric vehicle charging infrastructure specialists. The company provides easy to implement turnkey solutions and professional expertise on any EV charging project. From design specification, procurement, project management, installation, all the way through to maintenance, their solutions are built to last, future-proofed, and designed to fit your needs. We're grateful for their support in enabling this webinar to take place. Well, automakers are rapidly launching electric vehicles in Canada with charging speeds of 100 kilowatt hours and beyond, which is fantastic. But much of Canada's early public fast charging infrastructure is limited to just 50 kilowatt hours. So these vehicles won't always be able to charge at the speeds with which they're capable. So for investors and site hosts considering deploying public DC fast chargers, it's critical to ensure that any new charging deployments are fast enough to match the speeds of vehicles people will be driving in the near future. So that's what we're going to be tackling today with our group of expert panelists, who I'll introduce you to in just a moment. They are Stephen Tock, Director Americas Energy and Utility Strategies at Tritium EV Chargers. Mike Buff, Senior Manager of Product and Programs at Electrify Canada and Electrify America. Stephen Bieda, Eco-Brand Business Development Manager at Kia Canada. Maxime Charon, President at LeadingAhead Energy. And my colleague, Emma Jarrett, Managing Editor of Electric Autonomy Canada, who will be moderating today's discussion. And so with that, Emma, over to you.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Very excited to have you on the panel today. How about we kick off with everyone just describing a bit of background about your company and your role there, and we'll just go in the order Nino introduced everyone. So Steve, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Emma. Steve Tock, Director of Utility Strategies and Energy Strategies here at Tritium. We are a DC-only company based in Brisbane, Australia, with offices in Torrance, California, Amsterdam, and to support the Asia Pac area now, we've opened one also in Singapore. We have, I think, chargers in 41 countries, Canada, US, and boast some of the biggest public DC fast charging plazas nationwide currently. So happy to be here and pass it back to you.
Thanks. Mike, do you want to jump on and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Mike Buff. I'm a senior manager of product and programs at Electrify Canada and Electrify America. So Electrify Canada and Electrify America operate an ultra-fast charging network across Canada and the US. So our stations feature 150 and 350 kilowatt charging speeds, which are the fastest available today. We've really focused on putting in reliable fast charging stations in convenient areas. So that's along major highways and then within metro areas, close to shops, retail, really to fit charging into your daily lives. We founded the company in July of 2018. Our first station went in September of 2019. Today we have over or nearly 30 stations in Canada and over 100 chargers, but really excited to continue growing that. We've got plans already in the works to get up to 100 stations and over 500 chargers. So with that, back to you, Emma.
Very good preview of things to come. All right, Stephen, over to you.
All right, thanks, Emma. Well, I've been in the EV space since 2009, and it's something that I'm pretty passionate about. I serve on the Electric Mobility Electric Vehicle Society board and have past board member with Electric Mobility Canada. So been in the space a long time and project managed about 200 EV charging station projects, mainly AC, across Canada. And been driving electric since 2010, and it's with Kia. I've managed various projects coast to coast on our EV Experience Center in Vancouver, and government relations related topics pertaining to ZEV management, and we're really excited about our EV6. Of course, we'll talk about that later. The charging infrastructure that we have deployed right now is not quite suited for cars with that capability of the EV6, but I'm sure we'll see lots more of the 350 kilowatt units coming to market, and that'll be great for our customers and the experience that we want to deliver.
Thank you. And Maxime, you're up.
Thank you, Emma. I think Nino did a really good overview of the company here, but for myself, I got a sustainability background, and I've been in the EV space since 2015. Since then, we've carried on over 100 sites, whether it's level 3 chargers or level 2s across portfolio. We mainly work with developers and asset management clients who have a nationwide portfolio. So that's really where we help them build a strategy and deploy their charging station nationwide.
Super. All right, so we will dive into our discussion now. Stephen, if I could get you to field our first question. Let's start by setting the scene from the vehicles that are coming to market. Kia has been making electric vehicles for some time, but next year we're going to see the arrival of the EV6. And obviously, it's the company's first dedicated EV. Can you share some more details about the charging capabilities of this vehicle and others that are coming to market, and how they differ in their charging speeds compared to the previous generation of vehicles?
Yeah, sure. We've come a long way since 2014 when the Soul was introduced with CHAdeMO and maximum 50 kilowatt rate of charge on DC. And we've now introduced the EV6, and coming soon, like in Q1, you'll see them in dealerships. And it's based on our EGMP platform, the Electric Global Modular Platform, and it's an 800 volt architecture as opposed to 400 volt, which most of the industry is based upon. So what it's capable of is up to 350 kilowatt charging theoretically, although every vehicle has a programmed charging curve, and to deliver the maximum of 235 kilowatt charging that the vehicle will actually give to the vehicle is quite a feat. And it's amongst the fastest vehicle charging experience in the world. And so you get up to 80% state of charge in roughly 18 minutes. And on the AC side, it's also quite fast. It offers 11.5 kilowatt AC charging on a 60 amp breaker. So, both those are covered, and it's all about customer experience, and it's all about convenience. That's what we designed for. And the people today, are just not very patient. Everybody wants their cell phone charged rapidly and ready to go. And so this is a big development in the industry, and we're really passionate and excited about seeing many more of these 350 kilowatt chargers like Electrify offers and others, so that our customers driving the EV6 will really be able to get to where they want to go with minimal inconvenience.
So getting to where we want to go, Mike, as you mentioned in your intro, Electrify Canada and Electrify America operate a public network of DC fast charging stations and across the continent. And we're wondering, what does your customer data tell you about drivers' concerns with regards to switching to an EV? And can you share why your company has decided to invest in some very high-speed chargers?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Stephen's comments were a great intro. We see customer experience and convenience are key. And this shouldn't be surprising, right? They're key across any industry to getting customers to adopt new technologies. Certainly EV is no exception there. When we look at customer research, we actually find drivers really strongly prefer DC fast charging, and in particular, the highest speeds that they can get with their vehicle. We look at customer data and see that drivers would actually prefer to pay for DC fast charging over consuming free level 2 charging. So that's an interesting insight for us that helps continue to fuel our deployment and show that there really is a big customer need out there. At our stations, we're focused on future-proofing them. So Stephen was describing the EV6 and being able to charge 80% in 18 minutes. Year after year, we're seeing the automakers continuing to push the limit on faster and faster speeds, and that's great for the customer. We want to make sure that our stations can continue to provide that ultra fast, convenient experience. And so we think about, as we're building our stations, we're thinking about future proofing and making sure that we're really ready as the vehicle technology improves and evolves, and we can serve the customer. One last thing I'll quickly say, on customer experience, charging speeds are very important. They're sort of at the heart of our strategy. We also want to look at the broader experience, right? So we're thinking about, we have very simple pricing for customers. We have plug and charge at all of our stations, which is a really cool technology. You can just plug in the car and charger, talk to each other, authenticate, and you're on your way. It's very seamless. We're putting canopies at our stations everywhere we can. So it's really all about that customer experience. It's at the heart of what we do, and we really believe that ultra fast speeds are what drives that customer experience.
Thanks. So Steve T, Mike's given us a really great insight into the North American market and what people here are interested in terms of charging speeds. We have obviously a very vast continent to cover. But Tritium makes chargers that go all over the world and at a variety of speeds. What trends are you seeing from around the world in terms of what site hosts are looking to install, and what speed of charger do you consider best practice?
Right, so just to take off from Mike's comments there as well, the plug and charge, the Tesla experience is one that we're seeing, and Europe is a little bit further ahead, I think, than the US and North America, Canada. We have a ton of 350s all across Europe, and the Ionity network, when they put those out, knew the cars are coming, and it's made up of a consortium of the big automakers, and they wanted to put the infrastructure in, knowing that the vehicle's battery technologies would catch up and be there. That is now slowly getting over here. We are starting to see the higher powered charging. We're at 75 kilowatts for a lot of our plazas right now. We're just put in 175 kilowatts down in Pasadena, so that the driver experience, the minute that they have a taste of a higher power and their cars can handle it, that's what they want. And they want it to be seamless. And there's a lot of networks out there, so kind of streamlining that. Plug and charge is one, and just taking off from that, I think we're eventually going to be at 350s across the board, and we're already hearing can we go higher than that? We're 600, and right now it's the cars that are out there, the vehicles, that batteries that can take that. I think 175 is pretty much the sweet spot, the 150, 175, and fleets as well. So not just the consumer, but when you're talking about fleets, simultaneous charging and the ability to charge up these vehicles, the delivery vans, class 8, class 7 trucks as quick as you can and get them back out on the road. So there's a lot going on, and fun time.
So I feel like the thread that I'm noticing through everyone's answers so far is this idea of forward-looking. We can expect better cars, bigger batteries that charge better, and we need the infrastructure to support that. So Maxime, LeadingAhead has been involved in numerous deployments, and obviously you deal with this every single day. how would you summarize the status of Canada's current public charging infrastructure? And what would you say the risks are if we don't start to deploy much faster charging infrastructures and have that forward-looking mindset?
Yeah, so there's a few elements here. I think Canada started in a really good way with deploying a lot of DC fast chargers across the country, especially through utilities and private investors as well. However, I think we're starting to see a lack of not innovation, but following the innovation from the vehicles. And with as an industry leader and kind of proponent, what we're a little bit worried now is that all of the, Ford Mustang Mach-E or the EV6 is coming online, or even pickup trucks and bigger SUVs with bigger batteries. If we're starting to advertise those vehicles as charging within 20 to 40 minutes, which they have the capability to do, but they're going to experience a 50 kilowatt charging station, or it's really hard to find faster charging station, then it's going to result in a lot of frustration. And nobody is going to consider fast charger when you're sitting at a charging station for 2 hours. And I know that Canada is working really hard to increase the EV adoption. There's a lot of money being invested by the government, which is really needed and appreciated, but we just got to make sure that that money is going towards future-proof solution that is also going to help the user and the goal of adoption of the country.
Great, thanks. So to the group, as an industry for the last few years, especially in Canada, we've talked a lot about a mandate for ZEV sales, and people have their opinions on whether or not they think it's a good idea. Should there be, in your opinion, a parallel mandate for charging speeds to ensure that the public network matches the needs of customers and fleets, and that at the end of the day, people who are transitioning aren't disappointed by EV ownership when they are encountering repeat slow charging? So Maxine, do you want to just carry on and we'll go to the group from there?
Yeah, so basically it just follows my first trail of thought there, is that if we're working really hard to get people into EVs, and then somebody's having a pickup truck and they need to go around their day because they're in construction or whatnot during the day, but they're experiencing 2-hour charging or a lineup because the sites that we're building only has one charging station that can only charge one car at the time, we're going to see people going back to diesel and gasoline vehicles quite rapidly, which for the industry will be very disappointing, but also it's going to be that much harder to get those people back into an electric vehicle in the future.
And Stephen, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm really thinking that 50 kilowatt charging is more aligned with a 30 kilowatt hour battery. You see today, vehicles that can charge at up to 350 kilowatts, and the batteries are huge, over 100 kilowatt hours. So, to fund 50 kilowatt DC chargers through NRCan and other provincial levels of incentive, it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Whether it should be mandated or not, I won't kind of very much endorse that idea one way or the other. But I'd say that I think there's reason to include incentives that are based on much faster charging where suited. It's not every site can handle the power without some kind of battery buffering. And that's a challenge to really add the cost, because typically an NRCan charging installation might fund up to $75,000. And if you're looking at a 350 kilowatt charger, you're probably in the $200,000 range for just the hardware alone. So, you really, the price changes in orders of magnitude beyond 50 kilowatt. And if you're adding energy storage to it, that's you're into like a $500,000 project in a lot of cases. So with installation, and that's a challenge for every site. There's just not business models suited for that. But we do want to build for the experience. We do want to have the customer satisfaction and the convenience factor there. And there's needs to be some innovation and as well as incentive money from the government to really make the business models work.
Great, thanks. And Steve, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just, taking off from that as well, I think you're going to have like the Electrify Canada that has the higher powered charging plazas, across the corridor, across the highways. And, when you get off of that point, and that offers that kind of what gas station experience where, all the gas pumps run at the same flow, etc. But that's going to have that experience. But when you get off of that and you start going north and, into more rural areas, and if someone's mandated to have a 175 or a 150 or a 350, that make ready is probably paid for and the hardware could be paid for, but the energy costs associated with that going forward, it doesn't make any sense for that high of power for, the little mom and pop convenience store that put one in up in Nunavut or something. It's like, that just doesn't make sense. So I think it has to be on a case by case basis.
And Mike, thoughts on a mandate?
Yeah, I think, Steve touched on the issue of electricity costs. It's certainly something that needs to be managed and continue to be looked at. Look, the bottom line is that this is what we see customers want. For sure, they want it on highways. There's nothing worse than sitting on a highway at a 50 kilowatt charger waiting hours for your car to charge. But even on our network where we have stations in metro areas, we see that customers gravitate towards faster charging. It's in the vast majority of cases what folks want. Every customer is a little different. Every charging situation is a little different. But if we want to really drive adoption and give customers the experience that they're looking for, pushing for higher power charging makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. And Mike, I'm going to hold you for another question, 2 seconds.
Sure.
I'm like to call out to the audience that remember to put your Q&As or your Qs in the Q&A section. We will be getting to that shortly. So Mike, you were just talking about highway charging, and we know Electrify Canada has installations both on highways here and at shopping malls. And I wanted to ping off something Stephen said, which was like the cost of these projects and how location is so critical for like smart locations for making sure that the cost is worth what you're getting out of it. So what's Electrify Canada's strategy behind the deployment of charging locations? And, could you just expand a bit more on the different customer needs based on setting, urban, highway, rural, please?
Sure. So maybe just to start, as I mentioned at the outset, we are around 30 stations today, growing to over 100 stations by 2025. So there's a lot of growth happening. That's going to be a mix of highway and metro locations. So we're expanding our highway network to really offer a coast-to-coast coverage all the way from Halifax over to Victoria in British Columbia, and then also building out in the major metro areas as well to create additional density. Look, every driver's needs are a little bit different. And the key for us is serving drivers where they are, meeting customers where they are, right? So thinking about what are their typical driving patterns, what are their patterns for going to local retailers and trying to fit charging into customers' lives. And everywhere we are, just thinking about, fast, convenient, reliable.
Great. And does anybody else want to chime in on that?
Let's not forget about Newfoundland. I had some friends on a call last night on the EV Society board, and they were discussing how we really need to make sure that the coast-to-coast networks do include Newfoundland and Labrador. So there's a goal for us.
Great. So Stephen, now that you're on with me, I'll just bounce into another question for you. And this is a bit of a pivot, but how much do you think accessible site design plays into charging speeds and additionally the overall customer charging experience?
Well, accessibility is a huge topic, and it's not really particularly well addressed in most of Canada. BC seems to be a little bit more progressive on AODA compliance or the equivalent in BC. So, having wider stalls for folks that need wheelchair access and charging from a vehicle that maybe doesn't have cord management can be quite a challenge. So yeah, those are things that we really need to consider, and combine that with winter weather in Canada. These are the sort of things that get overlooked sometimes. In my past work in EV charging project management, we did supply chargers from a particular vendor in Connecticut that was really specializing in overhead units for underground garages, and that made a lot of sense for reducing trip and fall risk and easier cord management for people in wheelchairs. So yeah, it's really something that is not really stipulated in a lot of the funding definitions and criteria from the different levels of government, but it probably should be.
Great. And, accessibility includes things like audio and visual aids. Is there any, is that an industry norm or a norm standard for EV chargers that they come with accessibility options like that?
I'm not aware of that being, like Google Assistant maybe, or any kind of features associated to EV charging that has addressed the voice activation. Really the big hope, I guess, for a lot of the industry is that, we see a faster ramp up to plug and charge technology to allow that seamless charging experience without any apps, without any RFID tags, without credit card swiping and so on. Just plug your car in, your profile's already set up. The folks at Charge Initiative, for those who are really curious, you want to read up on the plug and charge story. Charge Initiative, CharIn, is an organization that specializes in this sort of thing, and I'm really thinking that that's going to be the future of the industry, and coupled with speed. I mean, combining ease of use and speed is the key.
So Steve T, what are the technical considerations site hosts need to plan for if they're looking to install 100 kilowatt plus speed chargers from an energy management point of view?
Yeah, I think, one of the, again, future proofing comes into play. And, when you're putting this type of an investment in the ground, whether it's a grant, whether it's personal funding, so on, it's, that the batteries are coming that are going to be able to handle this. The semi trucks are coming. And so even though we put 150s out right now, and we're going to 360 and higher, you don't want to have to rip up that infrastructure and relay conduit. A lot of the plazas that we're doing now, we work with that site host, and we're sizing the conduit up for the future. A lot of our products as well are replaceable with the same base plate, and so once that conduit's already laid, we can put a higher power charger on and just change the breaker. But when you're thinking also with the demand charges, depending on where you're at, you have to start factoring in battery power. You have to start factoring in solar, and the inversion to switch back and forth is just it's going to be commonplace with higher end, high powered chargers. When you have a lot of them in a lot, you're going to start seeing more and more 10, 20 chargers at a site. People want to be able to pull in and have a spot open and not wonder if that person's sitting at that one charger for 2 hours. And so you're going to start seeing a lot more of these plaza type, big deployments, and that's going to be a lot of power. Areas like, that have the hydro that can, just open up a dam and create more power. That's not a problem. But other areas, other utilities, that's going to be a problem with demand charges. and that load management. So, there's a lot to factor in. It's site by site basis again, depending on how many charges you have and where it's going to be put in. So.
And I just want to probe on that a little bit deeper. With load management, invariably that involves conversations with utilities. So could you talk a little bit about that side of what you do to help facilitate, all the parties having the right conversations to make sure the station is a success?
Yeah, so the make ready, the biggest part is getting the utility to size the transformer up right and make sure that the site house is putting in the right size of a transformer or the make ready. And you, again, want to have that. You don't want to overkill it and put too much in, but you still want to be able to know when you size up, you've got enough power. There's a guy I work with that loves to talk about oversubscription, and, with 25 chargers in the ground, we kind of look at it as there's not going to be a car taking that high of power on every single one at the same time. And so, we size the transformer up based on this oversubscription factor that, this car will be here for 10 minutes, this one will be 20 minutes, and factor that in as well. So that does that load balancing, kind of within our software in the background. But working with the utility doesn't want you to be on a microgrid or, get off of their power. So it's, they're wanting to work with you. They're wanting to find ways that works with them as well. Some of them we're seeing are outright buying the chargers and putting them across their territory, just because they want their consumers that are in their territory to know that they're, making an effort to be green, and they want to make sure people can get to, where they're going and stuff. Hydro One, OPG, they kind of led that, by putting a lot of chargers out into their territory. So, you can go from Thunder Bay over to Toronto now if you need to easily. So it's, it varies by utility, but, definitely you want them involved from the start.
Great. And Maxime, that dovetails us nicely into a question for you about, when it comes to site design, where is the most common point to misstep, and how can networks and site hosts be smarter about planning?
Yeah, I think that when everything started, it was really about putting charging stations out wherever possible and where there was a good case for it. I think now we really need to start looking at future-proofing every site, to say a little bit like Stefan was mentioning. As I mentioned, we've got a sustainability background, and if we're going to install charging stations that are going to last for a long time, we've got to make sure that they are future-proofing for the cars that are coming as well. Otherwise, we're kind of just building disposable items, just like our phone, because they're going to be replaced over and over again, and that's really not good for greening the transportation sector. But we can also think about the GHG emission, coming from excavating and having civil work to be done every single time that you need to add a charger. So the same line of thought, just make sure that you have a lot more conduit, because PVC pipe is pretty cheap compared to having to open a trench all the way back to your building or wherever your utility is coming from. So that's very, very important. But also we talked about accessibility, and we're pretty proud to build the first handicap access purpose-built DC fast charger in Squamish a year and a half ago. That's something that has never really been done, because if you look at sites, they're usually really tight stalls one next to the other, and there's barely any room to fit somebody with a handicap. So it doesn't, if you have a site with multiple charging stations, it doesn't have to be handicap accessible for every single one, but at least having one or two charging station meant for that. The other part is also the canopies, especially in BC. We've seen, I'm sure in Quebec, they've seen the same, where it snows a lot and there's no canopy, and people needs to carry shovels in their trunk to get to the charging station because they can't really get there. The cord's not long enough. So canopies in areas where it snows a lot or even rains a lot is very important. We don't see any gas station being built right now where there's no canopy and you're, standing in the rain, filling up your car in the same way. You want to provide the same experience for the charging users. And I'd say that last thing is also making sure that there's more than one charging station per site. We're seeing a lot of companies now bringing up technology where you can charge 2 cars at the same time or simultaneous charging on one charging station. One, it reduces the stress of somebody going to a charging station and wondering if they're going to have to wait in line because the only charger that they have planned to use is already in use. And it also reduces the cost quite a bit by installing a charging station that can charge 2 cars instead of 2 complete charging stations to achieve the same. So in that way, those are the points that are really important to think about when starting to plan a project.
Great, thanks. And just a quick follow-up to that, anticipating the vehicles that are coming very soon down the line, we know that the F-150 Lightning is reasonably imminent, and that will change a lot of the different types of vehicles that are showing up to charge. So towing will likely be a significant driver of faster DC charging. How does station layout need to change from what it is currently to better support the growing number of sessions, more towing, and faster speeds?
I can jump in a little bit. I wanted to just kind of dovetail a bit on what Maxime was saying, and it kind of ties in what you're asking here, is that we don't necessarily always have to be focused just on the speed and like the in and out process of charging. Particularly when you got bigger vehicles with bigger batteries, it's going to be a while. You're going to be still maybe 40 minutes with these 100+ kilowatt-hour battery packs. So what if you were to provide other amenities at the charging station that will help people's experience go by faster? Like what if there's vacuum cleaners, and what if there are ways to, air compressors to pump up your tires? And so while you're charging, you're doing something useful and you're helping pass the time. For the clean freaks out there, having a vacuum at your car while you're charging, what's wrong with that? I think that's an awesome idea. It's not been done. And I've been floating this around on different panels and talks that I've been on. So I encourage people to think creatively about, what we can do to make the charging experience less of a drag. It can be fun, it can be interesting, and you can do some cleaning up your car, do some detailing work while you're charging. That might be something that stations could incorporate into the design.
Great, thanks. And Stephen, I'm just going to walk you over to the electric autonomy design competition for the EV charging station of the future. I like the vacuum idea.
Yes.
I think that would be, I haven't seen any of the submissions, but I think that'd be cool to see. All right. So I think we will bounce into our audience questions now because they are piling up and I'm being a time hog. So the first one is, in the current Canadian environment, how are companies able to earn sustainable economic returns on a 350 kilowatt charger? For example, if utilization today is low, peak demand charges exist, and we cannot price electricity on per kilowatt hour basis. Does anyone want to take that away?
I can get a go at it. Well, it's kind of a catch-22 saying who's going first. If you don't have infrastructure, people won't get a car, and then people don't want to put infrastructure in because there's not enough cars. So it's really who's getting starting. And I think that, like any new industry, it's a little bit of a help from the government, what we're seeing now that they're doing with grants to alleviate that. What was the second part of the question again? Sorry.
How are companies able to earn sustainable economic returns on a 350 kilowatt charger?
Yeah, I think it's going to be the ROI is not only going to come from reselling electricity, and Measurement Canada is in the process of going over that hurdle of reselling per kilowatt instead of doing per time. But I think it's really a little bit like Stefan was mentioning, is combining services. So if you build a convenience store, just like right now, a gas station is not just a gas station. They mostly make their money from all the snacks and everything else that they're selling in a convenience store. So really need to start thinking that way, how you can combine the convenience of charging, making money that way, but it's not your only source of revenue, whether it's a shopping mall, whether it's bringing tenants or anything else that you can come up with a creative idea.
Yeah, so I would just jump in and say, yes, the upfront costs here are significant. We try and be extremely intentional about where we're putting stations to maximize utilization at those stations. Like many new infrastructure investments and new technologies, there's an adoption curve there, right? And we need to be a little bit out in front of it, so that as the vehicles continue to come to market, that you see more and more utilization on those assets. We're already seeing pretty substantial growth since, as I mentioned, first stations in 2019, and we're seeing pretty substantial growth to date, and we expect that to continue as Kia and Volkswagen and others continue to bring more and more EVs to market.
Great. Steve or Stephen,
I think also depending on location, again, McDonald's per se, doesn't need a 350 kilowatt. Their goal is to have people into the store as long as they can. So, 4 or 5 50 kilowatts or 75 kilowatts are going to make more sense. When you see these charging plazas that will probably be popping up that have 10 or more, you're going to start seeing more on a DC bus scale where you can have 25s, 50s, 75s, 180s, 360s, and base that on your current kind of fuel station model now, where 350 is going to be a premium, and the 75 kilowatt is going to be your lower cost, lower octane, I guess, charger. And you'll have areas that you can put in for semi trucks that can come in and charge up and go do their showers and whatnot. But again, it's a point by point basis of where you're putting in these higher powered chargers, and you'll see this more fluctuation of kilowatts. And again, the goal really in convenience settings and malls and things like that is to keep people in the stores. That's where the revenue is going to be.
All right. So question 2. Will the continued expansion of public DC fast chargers influence the need for fleets to install their own level 2 and level 3 site chargers? Feel free to jump in anyway.
Go ahead.
That's an interesting question, because no fleets are the same and no fleets have the same needs. Some fleets will have a 200-kilometer route in a day or less, and they might very well be able to do it with a 40 kilowatt hour battery, which makes sense to have level 2 charging overnight at their depot. But not all the fleets are created equal, and a lot of them are traveling further distances, whether it's local delivery, but local delivery, sometimes you're going to travel 400 kilometers in a day because you're on a highway all the time. So the needs are going to vary, but that's also another thing about site design, where we're going to have to start accommodating the parking stall or the site design for a bigger vehicle. Whether there's a trailer attached or, so you're doing a little bit of a circle, just like in a gas station, because right now, if you trying to haul something with your pickup truck, you need to leave your load behind, go charge, and then pick it up again, which is quite a bit of a burden. And that will come in fleets as well, if you have a landscaping company or construction company. So it really varies, I would say, depending on the needs of every single fleet at that point.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think the other thing I would add is for some fleets, those investments are actually complementary, right? So for some fleets, they actually need a mix of depot-based charging, overnight charging, and then some public charging to help with routes that might pop up that are out of the ordinary, or the segment of routes that exceed the vehicle's range. So I think, and then there's some fleets that simply overnight charging doesn't work for them. I mean, when you think about Uber and Lyft vehicles, for example, for many of those drivers, that overnight charging isn't an option. So it's really, I agree with Maxime, it's on a case-by-case basis, but I think they're more complementary here than the question originally suggests.
I'll just jump in as well on this. One of the things that I'm excited about seeing one day, it's something that I think VW introduced as a concept a few years back, is Robo Charging, particularly for underground parking garages and such. But in a fleet context, that would be a wonderful place to put Robo Charging. These autonomous sort of vehicles that could with battery packs that could plug into a car, and when that technology is available down the road, that could really solve a lot of the problem with a lot of capacity, because you could just schedule charging from one vehicle to the next in a fleet, in a parking garage or outdoor facility, and it would get it all done without having as much infrastructure cost.
Super. So number 3, very fast EV charging can significantly increase the cost to a site host of their power cost utilities through demand charging. So would anybody like to jump in on demand charging and the whole debate about whether or not there's a need for reform?
I think this goes back to that same thing with the, working with the utility. What we're seeing right now is, in just certain areas of the United States, is, a lot of the utilities are offering 5-year waivers on demand charges, and, certain ones are 3 years. But then what happens when the 5 years is done? Then, now their power bill goes extremely high. So I think there needs to be, the commissions have to be looked at to make that a viable solution. These hubs, again, when the more and more chargers you get, you don't want to just keep raising your kilowatt rate to cover your electric bill. So there has to be back and forth with the utility, with these demand charges to work with them, and the utilities have to play ball, or you're going to see a lot more people go into a microgrid scenario with batteries and solar, where they're able to, generate their own power and not rely on the utility. So it's still, I think, very new. A lot of the utilities, are just now getting on the bandwagon to figure this stuff out and putting in rate cases with their commissions. So it's still new to them, I think. And, a lot of people look towards California to see what they've done. But again, it differs by each utility.
Yeah, I would just jump in here and say that I think in Canada it's a little bit of a different scenario, where utilities are sometimes crown corporations, not in every province, but in a lot of them. And they've been the first out putting DC fast chargers and being really innovative. But I don't think that we can rely only on the utility companies to provide the DC fast charging needs that we will need in the foreseeable future. The private market really needs to get involved, and having those demand charges either waive for 5 years, just like Stefan mentioned, to let the adoption get to a point where it's commercially viable, and making sure that those demand charges can be covered, or looking at a site where the demand chargers are already in effect on the bill, and adding charging station wouldn't add the increase in cost because they're already paying for them in charges at that point.
Great. Does anybody else want to jump in, or are we okay to move on? I will take the silence as an okay to move on. All right. So the next question is a two-parter, and we start off with a bit of a chicken and egg problem. So living in Northern Canada, small towns and First Nation communities and small businesses in isolated areas can't necessarily afford the high cost of level 3 charging stations for long distance travel. Without these stations, there may be a hesitancy to buy an EV at all. Does anybody have any innovative solutions for this?
That's where I would say, what I mentioned before is this is where the utility can come into play and where they can purchase the chargers and, either go to the municipality and say, here, we've got 20 of these, this municipality puts one in, and where they're purchasing them outright and not giving the grants, because it's hard for, a small company or small business to say exactly that. Why would I put this in here? I can't afford the even a 50 kilowatt. But when the utility is saying, here's the charger, put it in, and whether it's a split kilowatt cost charge, it makes it a lot easier. And I think, looking back at Ontario Power, who put all these in all over the place, they went and found site hosts and said, here, or I think the network provider found the site host and then helped put those in. So I think, smaller towns, smaller communities, working with the municipalities, that's how it has to be done, because a lot of the small mom and pop shops cannot afford it.
There's new government program at the federal. We had it in BC for a little bit, but we'll see how it goes with whenever we get the details from the carbon credit program with Canada, and see how it's calculated and when the whole details are being rolled out in January. But that's going to be another additional source of revenue for whoever owns a charging station. I think right now the network providers have managed to get the credits, even though they're not investing in the charging station themselves. So if you are a private entity and you invested in your own charging station, make sure that you talk to your network provider so the credits are going to you and not by default to them, so they can profit from that.
Super. So part 2 of this question is that Canada recently completed the first permanent year-round highway to Tiktoyaktuk, which is on the Arctic coast. How will we handle charging for remote locations like that in the future? And I'm going to just add that it's fast charging. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in. I mean, we're vendor agnostic, as we've mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. And there's a really good company in California called FreeWire who's doing fast charging at 150 kilowatts, but they're also having a battery pack to mitigate it. So you're charging at inherently 27 kilowatts. So you avoid all those demand charges, but you still have that big 150 kilowatts charging for the convenience of the people traveling. And that's one of the only fast charging stations that can plug on a one phase. So if you're working with First Nations, and there's many areas where they're on one phase, and just to bring power to that area would be like 500,000 to 5 million just to bring it to up to a 3 phase, which is obviously impossible to there for them financially. So there are solutions like that. FreeWire is not the only one, but there's always a solution. You just really need to look around and do a little bit of investigation and find something really good for each cases of.
Maxime, Mike.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with Maxime. Look, the technology in this space is advancing really rapidly, and whereas the vehicle technology is sort of out front and center and people often see it, the technology on the for charging infrastructure is also advancing pretty rapidly. And so Maxine mentioned one technology that's out there today, which could be well suited. But I think more generally, as you look at battery costs coming down and being able to sort of leverage batteries in any sort of charging installation, so you see the cost of charging coming down as well. You're going to see more and more solutions as we look out into the future here.
I would add also that, if you looked at China, what's happening there, there's quite a lot happening around battery swapping. It's not dead in the water there by any stretch. There's hundreds of these battery swapping stations. And I think one supplier has done over 4 million swaps. So maybe in northern regions, that could be a solution that would make sense.
Great. Yeah, these are all very good ideas. We are pushing against our time. So unfortunately, that's all the audience questions we have space for right now. But before I let everybody go, you have like 90 seconds. I would like to know from each of you what you would like to see at the EV charging station of the future. What's your must-have amenity? Stephen, we'll start with you.
Vacuums and air compressors, and maybe something to clean your windshield with, those, and maybe some vending machines, you make it self-serve, but those are the kind of easy items you could add to a station, maybe generate a bit of revenue, keep the cost of maintaining them to a minimum, with personnel having to service and clean and replenish. Those sorts of vending type of solutions, I think, could go a long way to making the experience more fun and less people frustrated waiting.
Right, Steve?
Same thing, but maybe a valet service where you get out, somebody grabs your car, charges it for you, you go in, have a sandwich, have a coffee, 30 minutes later you're back out and it's gone through a car wash and charged. So
this is a platinum charging
ideally
station.
that would be great.
All right. Maxime?
Yeah, I would say definitely canopy and coffee shop would be great. I know a lot of people not everyone, but a lot of people have the ability to work remotely, and oftentimes when I charge, I just pull out the laptop and get her on the phone and get some work done. Obviously, if there's a coffee shop nearby, I'm definitely not staying in the car. So that would be a good plus to have at any charging station for sure. All
right, and Mike, final word to you.
Yeah, I don't think this is too much futuristic stuff. I think it's pretty simple. It's fast charging combined with a place to grab a bite to eat or coffee, a bathroom. It doesn't have to be crazy bells and whistles. It's just sort of the basic creature comforts and get people on their way as quickly as possible.
Super. Well, thank you everybody very, very much for this discussion. We covered a nice swath of the issues. So appreciate your time and insights. And Nino, I'll pass it back to you.
Well, thanks very much, Emma. And thank you, Emma, for moderating the discussion so well. That was a really terrific discussion. And I'd like to add my thanks to Stephen, Mike, Steve and Maxine for really bringing their expertise to the table, and also to the audience who asked some phenomenal questions, and we weren't able to get through all of them, so my apologies for that. A big thank you to our sponsor, LeadingAhead Energy, for sponsoring this discussion and making it possible. And a reminder that we will be sharing a link to a recording of this webinar in the next few days on electricautonomy.ca, so look out for that. Also, I'd like to just remind everybody that we are in the middle of a full series of webinar discussions on public EV charging infrastructure. And you heard the panel speaking about plug and charge earlier in this discussion. And we have our next webinar on Tuesday next week is really focusing on plug and charge technology and how that will help improve the EV driving experience. So I invite you to sign up for that and join us for that discussion. But thanks very much for taking part today.